We have reached the finale of my top 100 favorite films of all time. This is the top 25. I feel like the top 25 deserve a little extra recognition. So what I'm going to do is add in my favorite moment from each of these. Sometimes it's a line, sometimes it's just a visual. At number 25 is Meet the Robinsons. I consider this an underrated Disney film. I say that because if you go to Disneyland and you go to the gift shops, you'll see merch for all the various films. You never see anything about Meet the Robinsons. There's nothing in Tomorrowland even that mentions it, which would be perfect, but whatever. I think my favorite scene is where the main character, Lewis, that's the blonde one there, he meets the family, the Robinsons, hence the name. In a way, it reminds me of a film I mentioned in the previous episode, which is You Can't Take It With You. Because we see every member of the family living their best life, so to speak. They're all doing what they want. There's so many moments like that here that are a combination of touching and hilarious. And it's just such a great balance. I don't know why more people don't talk about this film. But as for me, I have loved it since my first watch. At 24, we have another Disney film, which is a classic, Alice in Wonderland. It's so unique and it's so unhinged. There are not one but two rides based on it at Disneyland. I think my favorite moment, it's hard to pick one, but my favorite moment is when the dodo yells out,
"Hey, watch it there! Stop kicking that mackerel!"
And I don't know why, but it is just so funny the way he says that. For number 23, we have A League of Their Own, which I mentioned in my 90s video. This movie was so special to me, still is. And it was the first time I ever saw David Strathairn. There are so many great lines in this film that I actually am going to choose two. The first one is when All the Way May, played by Madonna, says to Evelyn,
"Evelyn! I'm sorry, but I'm gonna have to kill your son!" No,
because he's like running around screaming on their tour bus. It's just the way she says it is just so funny. And the other one is David Strathairn's character, shocking, I know, says to Tom Hanks' character,
"If we paid you a little bit more, Jimmy, could you be just a little more disgusting?"
Well, I could certainly use the money.
This was the first movie where I saw Tom Hanks really play against type. You know, he wasn't like the likable, jovial guy. He was, kind of the complete opposite of that. For number 22, we have Edward Scissorhands. For my favorite scene, I think I'm going to choose the one I mentioned in my top 5 Diane Wiest performances video, which is when Peg, which is her character, goes on the talk show with Edward. Most of the film takes place in the little suburbs and in Edward's castle, and you don't really see much outside of that. So them going on the talk show kind of shows what the rest of the world looks like. It's a nice balance. For number 21, we have Easy A, which you've heard me mention recently too. This is it's a comfort film. It's so rewatchable. And honestly, my favorite line, it's so silly, but it's when Olive's brother says,
"Why does that matter? I'm adopted."
What? Oh my God! Who told you?
At number 20 is The Wiz. As I've mentioned before, the movie that made me love movies was The Wizard of Oz, and I watched it many times. Then there came a point in my life when I became obsessed with Michael Jackson. I don't think that era has ever really ended, but I found out about the existence of The Wiz. So it holds a very special place in my heart, as you can imagine. And the equivalent of the flying monkeys here, who are on motorcycles rather than flying, they are just as terrifying to me as the ones in The Wizard of Oz were when I was a small child. It's intense. My favorite scene is the Crow Anthem, which is You Can't Win, which is a Michael Jackson performance, of course.
People keep saying things are gonna change, but they look just like they're staying the same.
His vocal is just so good, and his character is just so charming and sweet. And it's just a highlight of the film for sure. I also really enjoy the appearance by Lena Horne, who was the director's mother-in-law at the time. For number 19, we have Dog Day Afternoon, which, as I've mentioned before, I saw for the very first time just a few months ago. But it made such an impact on me that it instantly made my top 25 films of all time. Incidentally, this is directed by Sidney Lumet, who also directed The Wiz and 12 Angry Men, which is definitely one of my favorite films. I just don't have it on this list because I don't have it on physical media. One of these days I'm going to buckle down and get that Criterion edition I keep looking at. My favorite scene is the phone call between Al Pacino and Chris Sarandon.
I don't know, Leon, you know, I'm dying here.
Well, you're not dying. You're killing the people around you is what you're doing.
They are both brilliant there and so subtle. It feels like a real conversation. So here we have The Godfather, which is my number 18, and The Godfather Part 2, which is my number 17, and The Godfather Part 3, which is not on this list at all. If I had to choose a favorite part from The Godfather, it's kind of random, but it's when Vito is kind of apologizing for Sonny's behavior.
I have a sentimental weakness for my children, and I spoil them, as you can see. They talk when they should listen.
My favorite scenes in part 2 involve Vito and his wife, or Vito talking about his wife. I think my favorite scene is when Vito comes home with a pear as a gift for his wife. And it's just so sweet. And it's such a subtle exchange of looks between them. And just, you sense that pure love that's holding everything together in their world, even though they're struggling. And it's so beautiful. Also, Fredo has a lot more to do in part 2, which, as a John Cazale person, I can appreciate. Even though I love Marlon Brando as Vito, there's just something, that extra little special spark about part 2. So that's why it pulls ahead just a little bit. At number 16 is Michael Jackson's This Is It. This is kind of a hybrid of documentary and concert film. It's really cool to see, what he would have done during those shows. And some of the ideas are just so brilliant. He had such a creative mind. I think my favorite part, there's several, of course, but one of them is when Michael is explaining a little change he wants to make.
Let it close in silence. When that door opens, you start that piano. Da-da-da-da-da. God bless you.
He just felt so understood in that moment, and it was going exactly how he wanted it. It's just beautiful. At number 15 is Singin' in the Rain. People consider it a classic musical, which it is, of course, but I don't think it's rated highly enough as a comedy. And the line delivery is just flawless. And of course, the music is great. The dancing is incredible. And Debbie Reynolds, to hold her own against Donald O'Connor and Gene Kelly, who were seasoned professionals in dance, and she didn't really have dance training, but she just did remarkably well. I think she was like 17 or 18 when they made this too, so therefore the Good Morning sequence is my favorite part. I also really love the very beginning of the film at the premiere, when Gene Kelly's telling his life story, the polished version, and meanwhile they're showing us, the audience, how it really happened. And that the back and forth with that is just so well done. It is so funny. For number 14, we have Parenthood, which was my introduction to Diane Wiest. It was my introduction to several of these actors, actually. My favorite scene is between Helen, played by Diane Wiest, and Todd, played by Keanu Reeves. I've mentioned this before. They're in the kitchen and they're talking about her son Gary and his problems. And he tells her that, he had this talk with Gary and it made him happy. And she says, Gary was happy?
He even smiled. I never even knew he had teeth.
But that whole scene is just fantastic. And it goes from kind of the awkward conversation about Gary and his puberty and all that. And it shifts into parenting and fatherhood. And Todd has such a great perspective. And that is the turning point for Helen and Todd, when she realizes that there is a lot more to him than she ever gave him credit for. At number 13, we have Sister Act 2, Back in the Habit. Now, there's nothing wrong with Sister Act. It's a great film. I've seen that multiple times as well. But nothing hit me quite like Sister Act 2 did. And the soundtrack, which is not on any of the streaming services, by the way. I had a karaoke tape of the soundtrack songs, and I would just record myself singing those over and over again for no apparent reason. For my favorite scene, I have to choose the one that made the biggest impact on me, which is when Sister Mary Clarence, that's Whoopi Goldberg's character, is talking to Rita, who is Lauryn Hill's character. And she basically tells her,
if you wake up in the morning and you can't think of anything but singing first, then you're supposed to be a singer, girl.
And so I joined two choirs, a youth choir and an adult choir, shortly after watching this movie. For number 12, now don't gasp too loudly at this placement, it's going to shock you. The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King. Now let me explain. I did not want my top 10 to be dominated by a trilogy, because then there's really not much wiggle room for anything else. So I put two of them down here. My favorite scene in The Return of the King takes place only in the extended version because it was removed from the theatrical for a reason I can't fathom. But it is the confrontation of Saruman. Saruman does not appear in the theatrical version at all. You'll see on the shelf behind me by Maleficent there, those are my extended editions from when they first came out. These, I believe, are theatrical. I got these recently at my favorite used shop just because I really liked the way the packaging looked. So my favorite scene from the theatrical version, probably when Éowyn says, "I am no man," to the Witch King. Okay, at number 11 is The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers. Yes, I like The Two Towers slightly more than The Return of the King. I know I'm in the minority there. My favorite scene in either version is when we meet King Theoden and he is released from Saruman's spell by Gandalf. And the transformation when he goes from that state back to his real self. It's just so well done. Bernard Hill is just fantastic there. Most of what you see isn't even the effects, it's his performance. And it's just brilliant. In fact, I think it's kind of what makes this pull ahead of The Return of the King. So several of you have mentioned, I can't wait to see what your top 10 is. So here they come. At number 10, we have The Grand Budapest Hotel. And I know some of you are thinking, wasn't that in your Letterboxd 4 favorites just a little while ago? How did it go to number 10? Well, I'm not really sure, to be honest, but it's still a very special movie to me. Honestly, I think my favorite scene is when Jeff Goldblum's character, Deputy Kovacs, is talking to Adrian Brody's character, Dimitri, and they're talking about Dimitri's mother's will, documents that are missing, etc. And it's kind of, you would think it's just sort of a mundane throwaway scene, but the way they play off each other is so great. And I love both of them so much that it's just a thrill for me to see them together in that scene. My favorite line is the adult Zero says of the hotel, "I love it all the same, this enchanting old ruin." And I love that line so much that I had it engraved on a bracelet from Etsy, and I've actually considered having it tattooed on me somewhere. At number 9, we have That Thing You Do. The day my mother and I went to see this in the cinema, we loved it so much that as soon as it was over, we went out to the lobby and bought tickets for the next showing. And I remember when it was released to pay-per-view, we rented it immediately and recorded it onto a VHS, of course, as we did. Pretty much everything about this film is charming and memorable, but my favorite scene has to be when the Wonders are being interviewed for the local press when they're doing a state fair show. And the reporter says something like, "I trust you're being treated well by the people here." And he says it to Lenny, who's Steve Zahn's character. And he replies,
"Oh, I'm not here with these fellas. I got a pig in competition over at the livestock pavilion, and I am going to win that blue ribbon."
It seems like it would be a throwaway line, but I think for most people who are fans of this, it's their favorite line. I saw an interview with the members of NSYNC a few years later, and Chris Kirkpatrick referenced that line during the interview, and that was how he became my favorite. At number 8, we have Radio Days, which is a semi-autobiographical film by Woody Allen. Seth Green plays his character as a child, and the adult Woody Allen narrates it. And it's all about his memories of listening to the radio with his family and how everything tied in, you know, what was happening in the world and what was happening in the family, and all that tied in with the radio. My favorite scene by far is Sally White, which is Mia Farrow's character, taking diction lessons.
Hark! I hear the cannons roar. Is it the king approaching?
At number 7 is my favorite Disney film, Sleeping Beauty. Aurora is my favorite Disney princess. Maleficent is my favorite Disney villain. Philip is my favorite Disney prince. He actually has a name and a personality and lines and everything. Unusual for Disney princes. And my favorite sidekick characters are the fairies. So all around, everything is my favorite. I actually have a couple of favorite scenes because I love it so much. But I'm going to choose when the fairies are preparing for Aurora's birthday and Flora is making her a dress, and she's using Merryweather as her dress form. And Merryweather looks down and says,
"It looks awful." "That's because it's on you, dear."
And it's just so funny because her tone is affectionate, but the words are so brutal. I have a theory that the Golden Girls were inspired by the fairies in this movie. Watch both of those things and then tell me if you agree. For number 6, we have the movie that started my Adrien Brody journey, The Pianist. It's probably the first film of his most people saw, actually. My husband actually saw Adrien Brody in a movie before I did because he saw Solo back in the 90s. The Pianist, there's really not much I can say about it that I haven't already said a billion times on my other channel. One of my pet peeves with biographical films is when they add a love interest who didn't exist. And that happens in this movie, and for some reason, I'm not mad about it. It adds an additional charm for him to have a date with Dorada to show how life was starting to change. It's that normalcy of going on a date, and then we see the restrictions that have been put in place for the Jewish citizens of the area, and her being a Gentile, it strikes her what's happening to them. And it's such a well done scene. So Vladek's date with Dorada is my favorite scene.
I've always loved your playing, Mr. Spielman.
Call me Wladek, please.
No one plays Chopin like you.
I hope that's a compliment.
For number 5, we have Coming to America, one of the best comedies ever made. This is just, the performances are so brilliant, and Eddie Murphy and Arsenio Hall play most of the characters, and they're all distinctly different. It's fantastic. It is really hard to choose a favorite moment from this. The first scene in the barbershop
Sugar Ray Robinson, the greatest fighter ever lived.
Oh, come on, man. What about Joe Louis?
The Blonde Bomber. Now that was a great boxer.
You damn right.
And now we come to the letterboxed 4 favorites. We have The Darjeeling Limited, which is the first Wes Anderson film I ever saw. As much as I love The Grand Budapest, it got displaced from number 4 and this took its spot. But my favorite scene is probably the fight that the brothers get into on the train.
You don't love me! Yes, I do! I love you too, but I'm gonna mace you in the face! Stop!
And this is low-key, maybe high-key, one of Adrian Brody's very best performances, by the way. And I don't feel like people appreciate this film. There's a whole video about it on my other channel, if you're interested. At number 3, you are tired of hearing me mention this movie by now. Number 3 is The Princess Bride. Yeah, basically I made this movie my whole personality. It's just so charming. I love it so much. And as I mentioned before, I really like this cover. I have several versions of this. I've been reading Cary Elwes's book he wrote about the making of this, and it's so sweet and so insightful, and I'm just really enjoying that book. The Princess Bride turns 40 next year. My hope is they will re-release it in theaters for the occasion, and that would be fantastic. I've actually never seen it on the big screen. I'm one of the people who jumped on board after it came to home video. There are so many classic lines in this film. It is so hard to choose a favorite. I think I'm gonna go with the scene where Fezzik is continually making rhymes and him and Inigo are kind of going back and forth. Vicini finally gets really mad and says,
No more rhymes now, I mean it!
Anybody want a peanut?
Yeah!
It is just so funny, and I don't know why. It hits me every time. It's just hilarious. At number 2 is The Birdcage, which was number 1 on my 90s video, so you probably saw it coming here somewhere. It is just so charming, and I've already talked about it a lot, so I won't do too much. But it is coming back to theaters for its 30th anniversary in June, I believe, and I am so going. Honestly, I think most of my favorite lines are just anything that Agador says.
Why?
Why are you giving him drugs? What the hell are Pyrrhin tablets?
It's aspirin with the A and the S scraped off.
My God, what a brilliant idea.
I know.
Hank Azaria is just brilliant here. To be a scene stealer in a movie with this stacked of a cast is quite a feat. At number 1, as you've most likely predicted, is The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. Fellowship is just special. There's that prologue with Galadriel kind of giving the whole history of the ring. And she does it in a way that it doesn't feel like an exposition dump. It feels like you're being told a story. And it's just the flow of it is so lovely. I really enjoy seeing what life is like in the Shire. The way they live their lives and their relationship with food. It's so me. You get the introduction of the characters at the Council of Elrond, and they form the Fellowship. Also, Fellowship is the smoothest of the extended versions. If you hadn't seen the theatrical and you just saw the extended, it would probably be really hard for you to pick out what was the extended footage because it flows together so well. When I did a top 25 before, I had the entire trilogy as my number 1. The Fellowship of the Ring is the one I've watched the most times. I feel like it can be watched by itself more easily than the other 2. My favorite line is in the Mines of Moria when Frodo and Gandalf are talking about, life and death and mercy. Gandalf says,
all we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us.
That line it repeats in my head every so often, and it really stuck with me over the years. And, Sir Ian McKellen delivers it so perfectly. Of course, he's perfect throughout the trilogy, honestly. So that is it. my top 100 favorite films of all time. If you made it through all 4 parts, thank you so much. So I just wanted to thank all of you who have been watching and commenting and interacting with me. It's been so encouraging, and it's giving me such a sense of community to have found you all here on YouTube. And so I really appreciate your time, and I really appreciate the fact that anybody cares about what my top 100 movies are. So take care, and I hope to see you again.